you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know?
So, welcome back from lunch, everybody. My name is Celestia Ward, as most everybody knows. Y'all met me yesterday when I did my presentation. I am a caricature artist, but I'm also an editor and a writer, and I've done articles for Skeptical Inquirer. I've illustrated covers for Skeptical Inquirer. I am active on social media. I run Squaring the Strange with. Oh, I'm not talking.
Go ahead.
I was the one, and because I'm in charge of all these things, I also forget to do little things like hold a microphone. But Ben and I run Squaring the Strange, the podcast, and that is my intro. A quick abbreviated version for people who weren't here yesterday. So my first question to the media and outreach panel is, can each of you introduce yourselves? Ben, why don't you go first? You guys are both skeptical resources. Tell us how you started out and what makes you a skeptical aggregator of information.
Aggregator. Well, I'm Benjamin Radford. I'm probably best known as deputy editor for Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine for the past 26 years, which seems even longer when I say that out loud. Also, author of books and do investigations. So that's one of the things that sort of makes my position unique is that I don't just do editing. I also do skeptical investigation into a variety of claims ranging from cryptozoology and chupacabras to ghosts and urban legends and so on. And what sort of one of my entries into this is I like to see myself sort of bridging the gap between the public and skeptics, insofar as, for many years I was a writer for Discovery News and LiveScience.com and other outlets like that. And in that capacity, I wasn't saying, this is the skeptical position, this is the skeptic's take. I was saying, this is science, this is critical thinking, and here's how we apply these prisms to these mysteries. So that's one of the things I try to do with my work, is try to bridge the world between skeptics and folklorists, between skeptics and the public, and so on.
And Matt, also known as the Credible Hulk.
He seems credible.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm the founder of the SciComm personality, mostly residing on Facebook, called The Credible Hulk, and have been admins to various other pages that do some combination of science communication, skeptical outreach, and or comedy or cats. Yes, I have a science cat page also. But I got into this sort of thing after I had already been exposed to some skeptical podcasts. I'd been listening to Brian's Skeptoid for a while, and Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and was studying science and engineering and math and stuff in school. And I really got into doing the outreach myself by starting out just arguing on the internet, wasting time.
Guilty.
So be things like different groups where there was some claim, some creationist claim, or some alleged debunking of evolution, or some claim about genetically engineered foods causing cancer or something like that. And so I just got really interested in diving into these topics and formulating formal rebuttals to a lot of the common claims. And at some point, I got recruited to be the co-admin of a page called Stop the Anti-Science Movement, which has, I think, still around 350,000 followers. The person running it has kind of shifted from year to year, and the guy who originally recruited me about 10 years ago is now running it again after a really long hiatus from doing that sort of outreach. And from there, I got talked into creating my own page because a lot of people were were citing this meme that had gone viral on the internet, whereas the Credible Hulk instead of the Incredible Hulk. And people kept telling me, dude, that's totally you. And so you should do a page based on that.
If I could interrupt, what year was that? What year did the Credible Hulk?
I created the page January 10th, 2015. And so the coercion that kind of led up to that, what happened in December, I spent a New Year's hanging out with Yvette de Entremont, the Sci Babe, and she kept on poking at me, telling me, you got to make that page, tell me, the people love it, it's so catchy. And I was very reluctant to do that and put my own face on the product, so to speak. But it was pretty quickly catching on as soon as I did so, and people liked the content. It grew really fast. Of course, the algorithms that governed Facebook have changed dramatically over the years, so that now it's much more difficult than it once was to accumulate a large following on there. It used to be that we would just basically, a bunch of other people who were doing similar things would just share each other's content, and that would, you would get like another 1,000 likes or something like that to your page just from like 1 or 2 shares. Skeptic's Guide to the Universe would share one of my posts, and all of a sudden I, have like 5,000 new fans or something. Well, it's a little bit harder now.
Well,
That's how I
What do you
started.
stand right now? How many thousands of followers do you have?
I think I've been static at around 330,000 for like the last 4 years or something like that.
Oh.
So it hasn't really increased or decreased significantly in the last few years.
Yeah, I did not know that Cybabe had a hand in your genesis as the Credible Hulk, which, by the way, works great because you've had a history in bodybuilding. So it was a clever marrying of that. And people like clever stuff. So whenever you can tie skepticism and science to something clever and humorous and tongue-in-cheek, I always say go for it. One of the questions I have for the panel is, how do you define...
Well, hold on, you didn't talk about your background.
Oh, I did very quickly before I talked to you guys.
Well, not everybody has seen it. Why don't you give us your background?
As I said, I'm a writer and an editor and an illustrator and a caricature artist. And so I've done covers for Skeptical Inquirer. I have written a couple of articles, and I work on Squaring the Strange, the podcast with Ben. And I consider, skeptical outreach for me has just been everything, a lot of everything. Visual, verbal, audio. I define it as most anything that gets somebody's attention and makes them think about what they view as their worldview. We'll start with you, Ben. What do you define as skeptical outreach? Is it just arguing on Facebook?
It's not just arguing on Facebook. If it was, I would be far more effective than I actually am. I sort of see skeptical outreach in a couple different capacities. One of them is as I mentioned, sort of doing covert skepticism insofar as it's saying, hey guys, here's these weird topics. Here's Bigfoot, here's urban legends, here's ghosts, here's stuff that a lot of people believe, a lot of people are interested in, and there's this common perception that these are somehow beyond science. I don't even know what that would mean, but there's this notion well, science can't explain these. Well, they can, and they have, and there's lots of areas ranging from double-blind studies and alternative medicine and so on. So part of my interest is in trying to explain to the general public that you can in fact apply these empirical tests and research design on these topics. So
you can go to Antarctica.
Go to Antarctica and see whether the sun sets or not. And this is a falsifiable claim. So I think that's part of it. And again, sort of as you were talking about, I think part of it is also just is finding common ground between groups and sometimes between skeptics and believers. And that's one thing that I try to do, and Kenny Biddle and others try to do, is okay, well, you have these groups of people, or Mick West, for example, in his book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, with conspiracy theorists, is instead of just saying, well, these people are stupid, they're crazy, they're beyond reach, some of them are, but a lot of them, they're just like you and me. They just need someone to be patient with them and show them some respect and diplomacy. and say, hey, I understand why you think this is weird. Let's, talk to me a little bit. Let's sort of hash through this. And oftentimes I find that's useful.
Yeah, in fairness, a lot of science is counterintuitive. Now, how about you? What do you define as skeptical outreach?
I think it's a pretty broad, it's a broad category. And I think that any kind of outlet where you're advocating for critical thinking, advocating for science literacy, and just using the methodological skepticism mindset as a tool qualifies as a form of outreach. Even just going one-on-one with somebody could be considered a form of outreach, as long as you're not just sitting in a room talking about it to yourself. And I think you're outreaching to somebody. And usually what we mean when we're talking about it is that we're trying to scale up the number of people we're reaching, and that brings in a whole lot of questions about how somebody wanting to do it is going to frame their platform, how their personal brand, if you will, of outreach. Because there's a lot of different options out there, and it's a very personal thing. Like what topics do a person wants to focus on, whether they want to really stick to the fundamentals, like the real basic tools that you don't really have to do a deep dive on any specific scientific topic to do. Or if you want to specialize, if somebody has gotten a PhD or a master's in a really specific topic and they are really highly knowledgeable of that one topic, they might choose to just focus on what their strong points are. But there's also people who do outreach by using things that they don't know that much about but are interested in. It's sort of their excuse to do a deep dive on a new topic, which is also, I think, a very cool way to go about skeptical outreach.
It sounds like you're talking about a mission statement. When you're defining your parameters, like, here's what I'm best at, here's where my comfort zone is.
Right.
And that leads into the next question, which is, do either of you, as skeptical and science communicators and aggregators and outreach people, operate by a set of rules, something specific that you hold yourself to? And I'm curious to see if Brian Dunning has one of these sets of rules too, where, like, if you're engaging with a commenter, one of your 300,000 people, do you not engage with a troll? Do you engage only 3 comments? Do you never get political? Do you ask for citation only in certain ways? What are some guideposts that kind of help keep your outreach sane, or keep yourself sane? And I'm going to give an example. Matthew Inman, who you might not know that name, but if you've ever seen the comic The Oatmeal, he does the oatmeal. And I had a conversation with him at a different convention, and I said, I love the science stuff and the skeptic stuff you put in there. You may have seen one of his very popular among skeptics comics called You're Not Gonna Believe This. It was a brilliant little storytelling in comic form. I was like, you have this platform that is so good at reaching people. And he's like, yeah, but I hold myself to a rule. I can do a really important, like, scientific, message like that, but it has to be in between a vomiting cat and a pooping baby. I will lose my audience unless I keep the vomiting cats and the pooping babies. So his rule was he had to keep all the scatological stuff to keep his audience very large. And that's a sensible rule in the communication world. And, you could call it pandering, but it's also a realistic one. But that's my share of a rule I know about. Other rules, like how you engage with people, I'd be curious to hear what you have and then what you have.
Well, I don't think I have like a set of rules that's really etched in stone, so to speak. And the general rules of thumb, if I had any, have kind of morphed over the years. There was a point where you get so much more engagement on a post by commenters that I actually would kind of prioritize the troll comments. Because in doing so, you get somebody who's just like, they can't even help themselves. They're impulsively responding to your rebuttals, and people is drawing attention to the post. It's telling the algorithm, show this in more people's feed, show this in more people's feed.
You're weaponizing the trolls against them.
I was weaponizing the trolls against them. There came a point where I kind of just lost the patience of really spending as much time, because I would look at the clock and was like, holy crap, I just wasted 2/3 of my day, arguing with this, well, for lack of a better word, some jackass, and it did seem to help the engagement of it, because if I had this really thorough rebuttal that was just like, boom, Credible Hulk smash, and it would get all these reactions and stuff, and more people would see the post, and more people would reply to that comment, and it really would help get the ball rolling. So I would actually put special time into those kinds of comments. I shied away from that partly because it's stressful, and it would frequently just piss me off, so I just would have to back away from it for a while. And part of it is also just burnout, and then burnout with my degree and stuff like that. So, okay, I only have so much of a battery to put into this per day, and what really helped was bringing on some co-admins who can help moderate, and we do have rules of conduct for sure. Certain, really bigoted, highly homophobic or misogynist comments, or anti-whatever subgroup of minority, those get ban-hammered pretty fast now. I had a habit of just being really reluctant to ban anybody for any reason for a long time. It's like, I don't know, who am I to say where the line was? And I kind of needed some people to be sort of like a moral compass for what should be permissible, because it was also driving away the traffic from people who, I don't want to see that garbage in the comments, It's like, this is a cesspool, this is toxic, And so bringing on my co-admins really helped clean up the page, and they're not just willy-nilly censoring counter arguments, it's really only when it's framed as this, basically what some people would qualify as hate speech. So, I thought that was a good thing. I feel that they were better at that than me anyway. So we do have rules ethically. Topic-wise, it's basically anything we feel like posting about. Same with the type of content, whether it's video or memes. Memes can be really helpful because they're so easy and they are so popular, and all you have to do is just put a science-based theme to them, and it usually does pretty well. It gets a pretty good engagement. And I do have a website, crediblehulk.org, where I wrote many blog posts but haven't written on in recent times. So we like to mix up the content. And I think that mixing the particular mixture of content that you'd like to do is really heavily going to influence the type of medium, what the type of platform you use. I didn't like Twitter, for instance, because they restricted your word count too heavily. I wasn't a Twitter person. I know that there's ways around it. People are really good at it. They do these tweet storms, they call them, and it could be done, but it just wasn't worth the effort for me.
It wouldn't have worked out anyway, because now Twitter has changed their rules to be only hate speech, so you wouldn't be on there anyway. So
that doesn't work. Yeah, I think probably the main ones that I jump at are sort of derived from some of the guidelines that Ken Fraser and I have always tried to adhere to for Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine. And there was a short article by Ray Hyman called Proper Criticism, which I highly encourage anybody to read. It's maybe 2 pages, 3 pages or something. And Ray lays out a handful, maybe 8 or 10 sort of bullet points and like what constitutes proper criticism. And because, in the context of the sorts of things that we do, investigations and things like that, it ultimately often comes down to criticism, right? I'm not a particularly confrontational person. I don't enjoy getting in fights with people necessarily, but if you're going to put out some bullshit idea, I'm going to, criticize it. That is the ethical thing to do. Not just let it pass, not just say, oh, whatever. Like, no. Particularly with topics that can hurt people, such as alternative medicine, and homeopathy and psychics, and there are actual places where there are legitimate people that are being exploited. So I would say Ray Hyman's proper criticism. One of them is, off the top of my head, is be respectful. Be prepared. Clarify your objectives.
I've pulled it up.
Thank you for pulling it up. Do your homework. Don't go beyond your competence. Let the facts speak for themselves. Be precise. Use the principle of charity. Avoid loaded and sensational words. And that's it. And they seem very basic to me, but unfortunately they're not as widely done. So, and part of that is also, in terms of things I don't like snark. Some people love it. I don't. I find it counterproductive. I don't like it when it's used against me. I'm trying to engage in people substantively and say, let's understand this. And when you're just being, mean and snarky and this and that, I get it. It's funny, it's cute, there's clicks. I don't like it. I don't find it's useful. And at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is what's effective. Not what makes you giggle, not what pisses people off. What works to change people's minds. That's what I want to try and do.
That's a fair point. I do like snark. Amazingly.
Really?
Amazingly, we work together on a podcast. There might be a little good cop, bad cop going on at times. But sometimes snark is not for outreach. Sometimes snark is community building. And it's a sad tribalistic history of when you get together and giggle over some other person, it does bring the community together. And it hurts me to even admit that is behind skeptical snark. But a lot of times that's the psychological root of it.
It's also preaching to the choir, though.
Yeah, it's preaching to the choir as well. And that kind of, I want to do a tangential question, because you brought up memes, and I wanted to put a pin in that. Memes, now cartoonists kind of have a love-hate relationship with memes, because it's like, it's a non-cartoonist trying to do a cartoon. They just think they can grab an internet image and put words on it, and it'll be funny. And damn it was. And it is. And it's
barfing cats and pooping kids, I think.
Yeah, and they're often really funny. They're also often really simplified, and they are really good at instilling a wrong idea in somebody. So memes have been so effectively used by pseudoscience. Dave Thomas showed a number of flat earther memes that if you don't have the scientific backing or a drone to look at the perspective of this or that, you can look at that meme and be like, yeah, that's obvious, common sense, and it drills that wrong idea into your head. Whereas people who are coming at it with the scientific background, trying to do outreach with memes, we have, I feel, a much harder job putting a correct scientific principle into a very simple image plus words. And so I wanted to ask both of you, first, how do you feel about memes? Because you are a meme factory. I don't know how many you actually make yourself, or if you simply aggregate, or you have a meme. Do you have a factory of meme makers, like little Oompa Loompas that are making all your memes?
No, I wish I had a factory of Oompa Loompas making memes for me, but sadly, no.
Are you taking applications in case there's any Oompa Loompas who are listening?
Well, I can't promise the pay is going to be very good.
Shillbucks.
But yeah, you bring up a very legitimate point, is that, and it goes back to something that was said earlier. I think Dave said earlier, is about making something as simple as possible, but no simpler. And that is the challenge with making skeptical memes or scientific memes that are accurate, but they're not so cluttered with information that it kind of just loses the impact. You know, I've tried more detailed ones that have like charts on them, and you know, the explanations are as compact as I can make them without leaving too much out. But they tend to do pretty. They don't reach as many people. I think, you know, it's very difficult to put it in a way that's conveying information, but also retaining that effectiveness that the meme format has the potential to have. And a lot of the memes that get shared, I mean, most of them I didn't make, for one. You know, if I know where it came from, then of course we're going to credit that source. We're going to tag the page. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff gets made kind of spur of the moment, and people don't even put their name on it, and we don't even know where it came from, really. But a lot of it is just using humor, you know, to maintain and stoke this interest in skepticism and science. And some of it's like satire, you know. It's kind of teasing. I guess you could qualify it as a snark in that it's kind of teasing a particular view that's out there. You know, but then we have to label that. We don't just do it for the audience. We have to actually label satire now, because the Facebook algorithms, the AI is not quite there yet, and it doesn't quite understand when somebody is being serious and making a claim and when they're making a joke. You know, so sometimes something actually gets taken down because it was insufficiently clear to the AI what the intention of the post was. But yeah, there's a delicate balance with how to use the meme format. And, you know, you can mix in more elaborate articles where you really unpack the concepts. You know that those aren't going to get the same amount of reach as the memes, you know, but if you are offering both approaches, then you kind of get a little more or less the best of both worlds. And you can even post the meme and then put the article in the comments and do something like that, you know, so, here's a more thorough take on this topic, you know, which is something I've been using on and off for the last decade or so.
I like that idea of using the meme as like a gateway. Come, here's a little taste of this, and then here's a bigger thing. Yeah. How do you feel about memes?
I spend a lot of time debunking them, so they piss me off generally. Yeah, I mean, the thing, and I've written a couple articles in the last few years on the nature of memes. One thing that I find really problematic about them, and I'm not saying anything particularly novel, is that they're basically prepackaged, concise bits of other people's thought, other people's ideas. So you're presented with the meme, typically without context, and people either like or share, or occasionally, you know, or refuse to. But for the most part, you know, it's in these sort of these closed social circles. So people tend to like and share memes, even sometimes when they literally don't understand what they're sharing. And I've gotten into arguments with people, and like so I'll ask them, like, you posted this, what does this mean? Like, well, you know, it just, you know, Trump sucks. I'm like, well, I agree that Trump sucks. What does this mean? And it's all this endorsement. It's all this symbolic endorsement, which is what social psychologists call it. So they're liking sharing things based on who sent it to them, and do they agree? Is it a friend of theirs? And so that's really the thing I find problematic, is that there's no original thought. You don't need to have any original thought to like and share. And oftentimes people like and share stuff without even reading past the headlines.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I find frustrating is it requires no original thought, no critical thinking. They just want you to like and share like a little robot, and people do it. And again, that's fine, but if we're trying to encourage people to think critically and like question memes and question things, then that's going to apply to all memes, and eventually whatever it is that you're sharing, which presumably suits your agenda, is going to reach somebody else who's going to question, say, well, this fact is wrong. It's like, I may agree with your general principle, and this happens to me all the time. Like I'll see something shared, and I'm like, well, I agree with the overall point, but there's facts that are wrong in here, and that's problematic for me because like I'm not going to. If I put something on social media on my page, it means that I have, and a lot of people use social media different ways. I'm not saying mine is the only way, but if I'm going to put my name on it, if someone's going to see me sharing something, it means that I've looked at it, I've thought about it, and I generally agree with it, and not just sort of like, someone sent it to me, like, share, go on. Sorry for the rant.
A rant is a form of outreach.
And that was not snarky.
Now, many people here probably do outreach to their families, their friends, people on Facebook. What hints do you think you guys could give someone who just wants to up their game a little bit in terms of commenting on a thread without getting dogpiled? I mean, should people even risk commenting on threads on like a flat Earth site or a creationist site? Should you do something more proactive and in the real flesh and blood world, like go to a school board meeting and keep the creationists off the school board? What is a good use of time for skeptical outreach, and what can the average person do? Edit Wikipedia.
Guerrilla skeptics on Wikipedia.
Ben, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the one challenge, right? I mean, we all have finite hours in the day. Literally every skeptic I know is overworked and has too many projects, and there's no money in skepticism. So just, if you're thinking you're going to get rich by doing what we do, go somewhere else, because no one's, other than the shield bucks, of course. But the question then becomes, okay, well, what is the best use of our time? And this goes back to what I was talking about before about efficiency, right? It's like, yeah, you can waste, an afternoon arguing with someone on the internet. Is that going to make a difference? Usually not, but every now and then, and I've seen this in my own experience where I'll post a comment either on my page or someone else's, and I'll phrase it in such a way that they can't argue it, that they agree, they can't dispute what I'm saying, but it subtly undermines their point. And I'm not doing it to needle them. I'm going to say, okay, well, we're agreed about this. Here's the logical extension of this, and they're like, oh, do I like that? Or do I bag on it? They don't know what to do because
you're walking that tightrope.
You're walking that tightrope.
There's snark right on that side.
Well, but so I basically usually I frame it in the way of like, well, that's an interesting idea. Does this also apply here? Yeah. And like, well, no. And then I'm like, okay, well, and it's just sometimes I won't post a response. I'll just let it sit there. So other people, because keep in mind, other people are watching these, and we've all seen this, right? So whatever comment you leave to somebody else, there's dozens, hundreds, thousands, who knows, of people that are seeing their inability to respond to a simple, polite question.
Yeah.
And every now and then, I'm like, yeah, what about that?
And you can many people who engage on Facebook or social media in the skeptic world are well aware that you're not writing necessarily for the troll. You're not writing for the person you are responding to. You might type out an eloquent response explaining all the principles of the scientific, issue that you are explaining, but they're not going to read it. They're going to go, blah, 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 you're funded by Soros, or whatever. And no, you're putting it there so that other people who might have some genuine curiosity will be able to read it. Likewise,
and if I just is part of it is also I see it as sort of again, because memes are prepackaged bits of other people's ideas. Sometimes they're real people, sometimes they're Russian troll farms, and we can talk about that. But because that's the case, oftentimes there's a very superficial understanding. And if somebody, one of us, just makes a comment that sort of peels back a slight layer, saying, "I'm not saying this whole thing is wrong, but hold on here, like this part isn't right." What that does is that arms other people. So you've then phrased in a phrase or a sentence or two, given a lucid, concise response that other people who may be the similar mind, maybe not on that thread, maybe in an argument or maybe a discussion days or weeks, months later, says they remember that little comment, that little rebuttal, and say, what about that? And that puts it out there.
And then they take your thought and they put it into a meme, which isn't their thought, and they put it out.
Right. Usually my ideas are underneath a black and white photo of Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
Which works well for me.
I would like all my information presented that way. I have found that in threads, and I will hand it to you next, I'm sure, I have found that sometimes in threads, especially among communities where I am known as the skeptic, where I am known as the person who's going to come in and be like, that's bullshit. If I see someone who has a very wrong idea getting dogpiled on, oh, you're an idiot, that's not a chemtrail, blah, 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 blah. And I see this person's getting dogpiled on, sometimes I will turn off my snarkometer and I will actually be the empathetic hand. And I will jump in and say, whoa, this person is, and I'll, tag them, Joe Smith is really, getting dogpiled here. Here's the question he asked. And if you think about it, that's not such a terrible question to ask. He's probably being genuine. And I once thought X, Y, Z. Here's how I figured out it wasn't. And it was a hard path to figure that out. Check your privilege or whatever, And I've had some good experiences that way in terms of somebody thanking me and saying, yeah, thanks for seeing me as a human being instead of just, the enemy. And that's the way you can change some minds, is to, not just be 100% snark all the time, though it's fun sometimes, but throw out an empathetic life preserver and say, yeah, I see you, being, trashed here because you don't know as much scientifically as the others do. Come, have some knowledge.
Yeah, you both hit on a few points that were kind of communicated some things that are floating around in my head as well. And in reference to the question of whether it's advisable to go on flat earth pages or whatever it is and go and be the voice of dissent. First of all, I try not to really tell other people in skeptical outreach how they should approach things. It's personal to me that I choose not to do that, simply because I don't want to get dogpiled by a bunch of people. It's like 99.9% are really entrenched in some extreme idea, and I'm like the only one that's telling them no, because I don't think it's a productive use of my time, and I think it's probably just going to stir the pot. But I'm not going to say anybody else should not do that if that's the way they'd like to. Maybe they like to stir the pot. Maybe that's their approach, is they want to. Maybe it'll make one of these people think about something a different way. That's fine. But as Ben was saying, that what we're often doing is arming people when they hear your counter arguments to the troll, and yes, we're not necessarily targeting the troll as our audience, but we're answering their claim in a way that somebody reading it might actually take something away and be able to address other people in their lives, whether on the internet or in their everyday life, in a way they didn't know before, because none of us are experts at everything. And so when you have a large community of people with different education backgrounds, there's always something that you don't know. And so every person there can occasionally find some bit of information or way of addressing a certain claim that they didn't know before. So that's a lot of what my blogs were doing when I was writing those more regularly. We're just giving people tools to address those kinds of arguments. And yes, I will sometimes answer. If I see a sincere question and somebody's getting dogpiled and they're getting disrespectful snark, I won't participate in the snark and the ripping them apart. I will answer their question to the best of my ability.
And say, thank you for asking, yeah.
Yeah, that's a valid question.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that had I not gone, read this book or that book or took this course or that course. Here's what, to the best of my knowledge, the answer to your question.
And that, and just to add, that's the sort of response that I have personally seen can change people. I've personally seen people who through some comment, some act of kindness, is like, wow, that spoke to me, and that was something that really sort of turned something, or made me more respectful of somebody who maybe had a different opinion, or had a different viewpoint, or just didn't know.
Right, and in those cases, it's usually somebody who's not like that far down the rabbit hole. I don't know, you reference West, escaping the rabbit hole. Most of the time, that's the sort of people. Those are the sort of people who are our target audience. Or they're not too far down the rabbit hole. I commend people who are willing to go down to the really entrenched people and get in there and do all the really up close one-on-one type of thing. It's not my sort of niche in the skeptics movement, but I respect that. That takes a lot of dedication to do that. I'm more of the fence sitter sort of reaching person. And because I know this, I don't know if I don't mean this in an offensive way, but sometimes I look at the really entrenched people. Is it being analogous to drug addiction, in that if somebody doesn't acknowledge that there's a problem and doesn't acknowledge that there's something that needs to change, there's not really much you can do. You have to be engaging with somebody who's acknowledging they don't know everything and they want to learn, and then you have a chance to get through to people. But I honestly look at it as similar to drug addiction, in that when you're really in there and your whole worldview is from this perspective that it's not going to allow this other information to deconstruct the entire superstructure of this framework, this lens through which you're looking at the world. And so that's why, for me, those fence sitters and people who are science advocates, consider themselves, science people and skeptical already, and just sort of arming them with tools. Because if I can reach a couple 100,000 people, then, each one of those people has the potential to impart their knowledge on some other people in their lives.
Yeah, it can be contagious, And we only have so many tools and so much time. If somebody's behind a 10-foot brick wall, you don't have the TNT and the chisels to get through to them. Although sometimes, even with those people, you can say one or two gobbets of useful wisdom. And I have had this happen where they are just in their thinking, blah, blah, blah. This happened with a fellow I knew who was a creationist and hardcore religious, and I just told a little thing. I was like, okay, well, I won't go into the whole metaphor that I used, but we just had a short conversation. And a year later, he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm totally into evolution now. I was so wrong before. I was like, what? And he also deconverted and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, and he's like, well, yeah, it was some of the stuff you said. I was like, what? And he's like, remember you told me about that? And he told me the metaphor. It was, and I was like, that was like 2 years ago or a year ago or something. He's like, yeah, I thought about it after a while. And then it made me read some other things. And it just started, even though it seemed like he was behind a 10-foot brick wall.
I think it's also one of those things where, it's the phrase about, what would it take to change your mind? And if the answer is nothing will change your mind, well, you're done. Yep. If there's really no evidence, if there's no argument that I could present to you that's going to change your mind, then you're lost. You're beyond redemption. And that's one of the things I really see in terms of skeptical outreach in the skeptical community is a sense of humility. As much as skeptics are bashed for being arrogant and know-it-alls and whatever else, if you talk to us, we're like, I don't know everything. I want to learn. If I'm wrong, show me that I'm wrong. And it's just so bizarre to continuously see skeptics who are bashed as being, they know everything, this and that, and like, no. They're inherent in skepticism is a recognition that we don't know everything. Our perceptions and beliefs are fallible. Our what we think about true about the world isn't necessarily, and that includes us. Whereas it's often the true believers that they're just certain. They know what the truth is, and nothing's going to change their mind, and they're the ones that are really hardcore believers.
And skeptics also understand the fact that we all suffer from cognitive biases and broken brains and lazy meat sacks that we have to kind of navigate around. The last question I've got, and we want to wrap up before 2:30 here so we can kind of stay on track, is what do you guys think the biggest obstacle to skeptical outreach is? Is it the sense, there's a list that comes to my mind here, the sense of tribalism we are experiencing in the political times we have now, the fact that the pseudoscience hucksters can do or say anything they want, and we are bound by things like ethics and truth. We have complicated issues and complicated ideas to communicate, and people's attention spans are only so long. What do you, or even AI and algorithms, what are the biggest obstacles that you start banging your head against when you try to do skeptical outreach?
Well, one really important issue is just the speed of information. There's that expression, I don't remember who first said it, that a lie can reach halfway around the world before the truth is even getting its pants on. There's that effect. And being rigorous and accurate takes a certain amount of time and effort to communicate properly. And sharing a lie, as I think is probably part of the reason that Ben isn't fond of memes, is that it's so easy to just perpetuate misinformation in that format, just spread it far and wide without any thought involved. So that's a big part of it, but I think an equally big part of it, maybe bigger, I don't know which is the greater evil here, but ideologies that are not modifiable by facts are a huge one. Yeah. Because we know now, we've had enough people trying to do this kind of outreach for long enough that we know definitively that the primary reason for these false beliefs and anti-science thinking is not due to lack of intelligence, it is not due to lack of education, it is due to a worldview or ideological framework that excludes certain facts from penetrating. And there's nothing wrong inherently with like having ideals, like have an ideology, but if that one contains components that are contrary to the real objective world and that prohibits the modification thereof on the basis of incoming factual information, that is a wall that no amount of information is going to penetrate. There has to be this willingness to learn, and that goes back to what we were saying, what I said about the drug addict analogy, and that this is only going to be effective to those who have chosen that they want to be receptive to this sort of outreach. They want to learn things, and that is a hallmark of the skeptics movement, I think, is that we are using this skepticism as a tool, and we know, it's because we know we don't know everything, and that things that we think we know could be wrong or partially wrong, that we advocate for this way of thinking about the world, is because that is like a meta-level epistemological framework that kind of superposes onto other aspects of the worldview, so that if you have like a set of ideals, whether it's a political ideal or whatever, it is modifiable based on your evolving view of reality. And if somebody doesn't have that, then we're basically just throwing shit at the wall. We're not going to make any headway unless people are open to this idea that we don't know everything, and that you should modify all the time your views to fit an ever increasing accuracy of your understanding of the world.
Try to put that into a meme.
Just real guy, I think what he's saying is that is one of the big issues and Celestia and I were talking about this the other day on one of the shows on truth default theory. And one of the problems is that the average person doesn't update their beliefs. Facts change over time. So what was true 10 years ago may not be true today. And if you're a doctor, you're required to take continuing education, keep up with the latest things, this and that. The average person, there's no obligation. I personally think there's an ethical obligation, but for everybody but me, and maybe a couple people in this room, they don't recognize that some idea that was baked into their head, drilled into their head, that was genuinely true 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago may not be true today. And so there's not this continual updating. I do think that tribalism is a big problem, and it's certainly been, I think, very destructive within the skeptical community. The other two quick things would be, I think that there's a late recognition of the pervasiveness of misinformation. The field of misinformation research has exploded in the last 5-10 years, due partly to the Trump administration and COVID misinformation, and particularly in public health, which is one of my fields. It's remarkable just how big a problem medical misinformation has been. It is just unprecedented, certainly since COVID. So I think that is one field that I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel, because the academic world is finally belatedly recognizing and doing much more research into the sources of misinformation and belief and things like that. And last, I want to give a shout out to another thing that needs more work is more bridges. That is bridges between skeptics and the public. And this is where the guerrilla skepticism Wikipedia comes in, and Susan Gerbich's work, podcasts like Brian Dunning's stuff, and Richard Saunders and SGU and Squaring the Strange to some extent, Penn and Teller, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, anybody that's out there in some capacity pushing in some small ways the skeptical viewpoint, that is helpful, and we need more of that.
Absolutely. And we have 2 minutes left. Real quick, and to end on a high note, share a skeptical outreach win that maybe each of you remembers recently. I shared mine. I helped a creationist by saying something about a purple dragon in my garage or something like that, and he remembered it for a year and then gradually changed his mind.
Oh gosh, I don't have the greatest memory for these sorts of things, but I do recall that there have been a few instances in which a commenter on my page was commenting with some common myth about whatever topic it was, probably like genetically engineered foods or something like that. And then mostly other commenters would correct them and say, oh, that turned out to be a myth, check this out, and they send them some link or something like that. And I remember being really surprised when this, I remember one instance, it must have been like 2016, 2017, that's how far back I have to go, one I have even a vague memory of, it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. And it's like, okay, cool, I guess this is okay now. And I don't remember any exact comments, just that it was actually a surprise, because it's not really that common, where you get someone in the moment to explicitly acknowledge that it's like, maybe I was mistaken about this subject. I got no deep investment in this. This is just what I heard, and now I see that was not entirely accurate. Because I think most of the time, if it happens at all, it's more like Celestia's experience with 2 years later, there's some noticeable changes have occurred, because I think people need to process things.
Yeah. When it does happen online, when somebody does say, oh, I changed my mind on that, thanks for that information, celebrate that. We need to normalize it.
Screenshot.
Yeah. Give them lots of props.
Yeah, I'll just real quick. There's been, I'm pleased. I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I've got a handful of skeptical wins. One of my favorites, and I'll make this real quick, and I've written about this in one of my books, big if true, and also in Skeptical Inquirer magazine, was a woman that contacted me who believed that she was cursed. And this woman was terrified, just genuinely frightened, I could tell. And she wrote this very emotional email to me saying, "I'm frightened. Can you help me? I've been cursed." And I wrote back, and again, I won't go into all details. You can read about it, but I very carefully crafted my response to direct her towards psychological explanations and critical thinking. And saying, well, maybe, I know you believe that you're being cursed, maybe this isn't it. And I talked about like confirmation bias and this and that, trying to steer her away from believing that she was cursed. And in the end, the response I got back was, thank you, things are better now. So I hopefully helped her, from this really terrifying belief. We can sit here and joke about, oh, people curse. Like, if you genuinely believe that, like, when you wake up in the morning, there's some evil force that is trying to harm you or kill you or do bad things to you, that's frightening. I mean, that's genuinely frightening. And so, to the extent that I was able to sort of steer her away from that interpretation, I call that a win.
And that's empathy. That's the definition of empathy. Empathy is the basis of all effective communication. And remember that in all your dealings. Thank you.
James Randi, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know?